Ah, Intrasamos la zona Modiglia. Oh, hey brother.
Oh, how's the old Modigliate Space today? You feeling?
Oh, zona Modiglia fuerte. Intrasamos. Yeah,
buddy.
good.
So,
Just disrupting the pattern of the day with this Modigliate episode.
very nice, very nice. Topical to what we are going to talk about today, which would be disruptive technologies.
Yes, sir.
So I guess first thing, man, what do you think of when you think of disruptive technology?
Ooh, I think about things like solar power. I think about blockchain, decentralized banking. But most of all, I think education and the access to education is one of the most powerful disruptive technologies at our little fingertips.
Or little meat paws.
Yeah, little dedos de los carnes. You feel me?
Do little ham tubes.
Yep. Yes, indeed. What about you, sir?
Same. I think same. I think last time we talked, I was thinking of a disruptive technology as something that empowers a person or people kind of beyond the bounds of a corporate or governmental structure. So something that kind of gives somebody some degree of power that is not bound up by regulation or restriction or institutions. Yeah, totally.
Right on. Well, what are you most excited about? What when you think about disruptive technologies that you want to manifest in your life and put to your disposal? What tickles the old meat walnut?
I'm really into solar and blockchain, two of the things that you mentioned so far. I'll just touch on why for both of them. For solar, I think that solar is going to be high efficiency solar is probably going to be the tipping point of our civilization, where we come from energy scarcity and energy poverty into relative infinite energy abundance.
Yeah.
And I think it solves a lot of problems that are almost entirely energy related, like desalinating water, different stuff. Like I think once there's unlimited solar power, I mean, obviously battery technology has to kind of catch up with it, but battery technology is getting crazier by the day. I think that empowers people at scale to do things on a personal level that they would normally have to rely on a municipal power grid for, which is just not a reality in probably more than half of the world.
Yeah, definitely.
And then blockchain, because I think it's going to revolutionize the way that we vote. I think that it's going to revolutionize democracy in the sense that eventually there's going to be some version of blockchain, encrypted voting that's probably just going to happen from your cell phone. And is kind of incontrovertible, unhackable, and will give us. I think we've seen right now with Republicans trying to suppress the Democratic vote by mail effort in a lot of places. You've seen I think it was either the Michigan or somewhere up there, Wisconsin Supreme Court struck down a ruling that was supporting the right to do vote by mail, because it's a conservative Supreme Court, and they know that if they give people the right to vote by mail, then Republicans are definitely going to suffer in the election because of that. So I say solar and blockchain are my big ones. You got any that you're particularly attached to?
I'm very attached and very interested in developments in what would be kind of under the umbrella of sustainable housing or building, I guess. One thing that stands out to me is the the Earth ships that this fella named Mike Reynolds kind of pioneered in the 70s. You know, and the idea of moving away from kind of timber frame cardboard houses that last, you know,
maybe 50 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 50 years. Yeah.
And moving into houses that are utilizing the environment, that are you know, utilizing things like passive solar, and, you know, just maximizing energy efficiency, and also are able to maintain a kind of self-sustaining footprint, whether that's through some level of on-site water harvesting or waste treatment. Things like that, I think, are just absolutely necessary technologies moving forward in our society and kind of globally. You know, you and I talk a lot about ideas of like scarcity and the idea of like manufactured scarcity. And I think that like we've waxed philosophically on before, the idea that overpopulation is this looming threat to humanity is there's a kernel of truth in that.
Sure.
But a lot of the kinds of scarcity that people fear are actually bound up in resource uses and the mismanagement and misappropriation and mistreatment of natural resources, more than it is about a head count. And,
let me ask you this.
Yeah, lay it on me.
Do you think that there's a real kind of arms race right now I feel like between government surveillance / authoritarian government control and decentralization and the kind of the democratization of destabilizing technologies? What do you think is going to win out? Like, do you think there's a long game here where we're going to watch governments utilize technologies to have higher levels of control, or do you think that we'll watch citizens utilize the kind of technological flex at their fingertips to become, I don't know, like maybe post governmental or something like that?
Yeah. I think to arrive at a place like that, I think we're talking about a process that could be 1,000 years in the making.
Whoa!
Personally,
really? Wow.
I do in some ways, just because you know, if one thing seems to be a constant through, you know, even deep cycle human history, it's that people tend to try to aggregate in power structures and subjugate other people, and that's something that appears in myriad forms across human history.
Seems to be endemic to the human condition in a weird way, at least now.
So I mean, for me, I don't look at a technology necessarily overthrowing that, because I think those things will always, you know, the will of like self-determination of the mass human people versus the interests of power structures, I think are going to be locked in a jiu-jitsu match for a long time that technology in and of itself isn't really the key to. I think it's probably the key to both sides maintaining some semblance of control over their own lives, but I don't think that will be sorted out through this process. I think that the only way we're going to disentangle ourselves from, you know, kind of the oppression of our fellow man is through spiritual growth as a whole, you know, on like a species wide level. But that being said, I think that we are in kind of like a history of the modern society sense. I think we are in a particularly good standing to excuse me.
Blessings.
we're in a good standing as far as we have access to information and education in an incredibly inexpensive, democratized way that we've never seen before. Especially, when you kind of reflect on how tightly kind of global larger form issues were controlled by governments and various entities like that in the past, even in our own
Yeah.
country. I think we're living in the beginning of like a real golden era.
Me too, man. I see
And that's really exciting.
Yeah, it is really exciting. I see, I have this argument with people sometimes that kind of comes along the lines of like all of the media that, like, I don't know what's fake and what's not. And I'm like, well, it's kind of better to have the choice to sift through a bunch of shit that some of it's real than to be kind of stuffed the same 3 channels of
Yeah.
news and the same 3
And take it all
newspapers.
at face value.
Right.
No, I mean, man, that is such a great point. That is something that no, seriously, like I've thought about that a lot, that, the era of, and the epoch of fake news might be one of the best things for people who have some sense of like intelligence and nuance, because it really clues you deeply into the fact that like how we perceive the world is heavily based on kind of narratives that other people develop and kind of pass on to us, and having a little like reserve around any kind of media, I think, is a much healthier stance than believing in some kind of like true or false black and white worldview when it comes to participating in like knowledge, in media, in like collective experience.
Yeah, I
Because
think you're touching on something that's really cool, like the idea that facts maybe don't, like, everybody's kind of complaining and decrying the fact that like, oh, we just there's all this fake news and there's all these like things that people are saying are facts, and it's like, well, maybe facts are a little hard to come by.
yeah,
Maybe it's aggregating narratives that gets you closer to like what a fact is, right? Like,
yeah,
yeah, that I love that idea. That's really
dude,
interesting.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that like the quest for like a static knowledge of like current events or something like that is like, that's like a lifetime, like that's not I don't think that's the objective, or shouldn't be the objective of people. I think that we live in like a very like phenomenologically bound world, and that everything that happens, however that's kind of narrated back at you by someone else, or by the process of your own mind, is kind of like cutting through the immense amounts of data that create that phenomenon, and coming up with maybe usable narratives that are usable to some end, but don't really reflect some kind of notion of
objective
truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, like the crazy kind of post-truth environment that we live in is, maybe it's a good thing for people to reckon with.
I think so. I mean, it's like you develop the skill of sifting through news. I mean, if you're interested in figuring out how to do it, it's not that complicated to try and to kind of build out your bullshit detector. I think it's easy for people to kind of throw their hands up and say like, well, I just don't know. And it's like, yeah, that's fair. But also, I mean, you don't need to be informed on everything, and choose the things that you do need to be in, because that's a huge problem with news, right? Like the whole like 90s and before idea of news was like, I watch this program and I'm informed. And it's like, yeah, but what percentage of those things do you have any actionable power over? Like, is being informed on the murder that happened across town something that has any
or
bearing
across
on,
the country.
or across the country,
Yeah.
right? Like, is there any real necessity to be educated on things that you don't have a direct kind of correlation or ability to influence? Sometimes yes, but I think more often than not, no. And
Yeah.
choosing subjects and themes and narratives that you'd like to find a deeper sense of truthfulness about,
Yeah.
I think is really important idea, rather than thinking, and this is like such boomer thinking, I hate to say that, but it really is, but this kind of pill approach to truth, where it's like, oh, there's like a truth that I can eat and then I know it. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's just not the way the world works. It never really did work that way, but that
Yeah.
version of the world was sold to a previous generation and pretty well taken by that generation, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you take like a deep historical kind of approach to things, like truth making has always been like a state enterprise. You know,
Totally.
whether you're talking about state as far as like the Catholic Church or like Islamic like dynasties, it's always, or you know, Roman expansion. Like truth is always something that is a byproduct of certain kinds of power structures. Not to get all Foucaultian on you guys, but I think that's, it's an important thing to kind of pay attention to, that like um, you know, universal truth is something that is fought over,
Mm-hmm.
and if something is like up for grabs enough to be fought over, then you're probably not talking about something that really truly fits the mold of a truth,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely, man.
Um, but so I've mentioned this before, that like, you know, as far as, you know, coming back around to like disruptive technologies, you know, one of the
Mm-hmm.
things we're talking about here is information and education.
Mm-hmm.
And I I truly believe that only in maybe the last 9 years or so do we have any kind of access to like a large scale decentralized database that is easy to sift through. Like I remember when I was going to school, like you had things like JSTOR, or you know, these kind of
Oh
like
yeah, yeah,
college
yeah.
databases and stuff, and like
Mm-hmm.
how even like 15 years ago, not like information, you know, maybe not knowledge, but at least information materials were something that were like jealously guarded,
Gate
and
kept. Yeah.
and outside of like the
Mm-hmm.
reach of, like, you know, unless you were deeply involved in academia or something like that, that your chances of just running across a lot of this information was
Slim to
slim
none.
to none.
Yeah.
And I think that it's only in the last kind of 7 years or so that like the kind of platforms like YouTube and just the access to like real information has really cracked open. And I think it's something that hasn't even began to be utilized
Oh yeah.
by like the general public to the degree that that it will be. And that's extremely exciting. And that is, to me, you know, the human mind is the most disruptive technology you can possibly come up with, you
Yeah.
know, in a very real way. And you know, having access to things that feed the meat walnut is just a incredibly revolutionary thing that, you know, no one since like the invention of like the Gutenberg press, like I think that's like the most kind of similar phase change in like human understanding, is like, you know, this is like the Gutenberg press on steroids. And you know, we kind of see what that did with the world, good and bad, you know.
Yeah.
But like it changed everything, and it was able to really flex. Like you look at like kind of the history of like Protestantism and stuff like that, and it's like, man, if like if people hadn't have come up with like the printing press and been able to like cheaply make documents, like we'd probably be under like a one world Catholic government at this point. Like it really derailed a totalitarian regime that nearly conquered the entire world. And
Totally.
I think that what the internet is doing is like that on a scale that is like much higher orders of magnitude. And it's going to be really wild to see how this all shakes down.
So give me your. I'll do the same. We'll wrap this one up because I think we've
Yeah.
covered a lot of stuff. Give me your kind of hot take. Where are we at in? Give me a minute on where we're at in 10 years, and then give me a minute on where we're at in 25.
All right. It's 2030. You wake up in the morning in your Waddle and Daub shack, and maybe you turn on the tap, and above you, the water tank that's been harvesting rainwater all winter gurgles a little bit, and you fill up some just delicious, ionized water from your own, harvested supply, and you step outside, you're barefoot. There's some chickens running loose. You're having that kind of early morning amnesia, like, oh, like, like, where am I? Like, da, 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 like, and and you kind of like think to yourself, like, oh, where am I? Like, am I living in the the Middle Ages? Like, look at these farm animals and stuff. Then you go, oh wait, and you look at your watch, and it pops up a little hologram and shows the news of whatever information is relevant to you that you want to have access to. Oh, that's coming in. And then you hop on your device, and you chat with your homie 300 miles away. I think that in a lot of ways life is going to be very similar to where we're at now, where we were at maybe 50 years, 100 years before. But I think that hopefully our access to and our decentralization of information, of resources, is going to allow people to split the baby, so to speak,
If you
and
will.
Basically aggregate all the functional things from the last 6,000 years of human history, and into something that is holistic and functional and sustainable. And that may be a little bit early. You may be a front runner in 10 years to a lifestyle like that, but I think that you're going to be leading the charge, and that people following 20 years later, 30 years later, are going to look back at a lot of the things that went on in the early 2000s, the technological, the informational transformations, and are going to be like, oh, wow, that was the beginning of the slippage of a real dark age for human beings globally, one that may have been necessary to build some of the infrastructure that allows for kind of like this world to exist. But we will look back on like 2008 and be like, wow, like, can you imagine people lived like that in like tract homes, like tied to the rise and fall of like the price of oil, unable, legally unable to harvest the rainwater that falls on them from the sky. And people are going to think like, whoa, what kind of weird, like decentralized slave state were people living in? And that's my hope, that we'll look back in 10 years and be like, man, can you believe anyone lived like that?
All right.
I don't know. What about you?
10 years from now. Okay. 10 years from now, you wake up in the exact same house you're living in now. You pop in your prototype contact lenses that have officially kind of ended the 4-decade long war
screen
between
reliance.
yeah, the war between the body and technology. I think you pop in your contact lenses, you get the news, you find out, you scroll through your social media, all while you're doing everything that you normally do. It's just an integrated part of your daily experience. You're living a life that is hybridized with a digital augmented reality. I think 10 years, it's still going to be a novel concept. I think 10 years from now, we're looking at the first folks who just have ocular implants. Like, I think the contact lenses are going to be for us old folks who are a little less comfortable crossing the old blood barrier. I think you immediately tap in with your biometric data because you've got a little RFID computer swimming around your bloodstream. You check your iron levels, you check your cholesterol levels. It tells you how you slept. It tells you, whether you had good dreams or bad dreams, how rested you are. I think that the paradigm that I see in the next 10 years, and I'd like to do a whole episode about this, is the idea that and one of the most destabilizing technologies, the awareness of what your body actually does. Like how the meat suit actually works. It's a little insane and almost criminal to me that in 2020, like, I have tinnitus, I have ringing in my ears, and we don't know why. And it's like, wait, what? Like, wait, we fight global wars and like we launch shit into space, but you fucking people can't tell me why my ears ring. Like, give me stop everything else and just figure out what the meat is doing, man.
Like, you shouldn't be able to go to a doctor and they go, I don't know.
I'm just like,
which has happened so many times to me.
Dude, it's like we're living in like some New Guinean tribe, and I've gone to like my witch doctor, and they're just like, I don't know, seems like a curse.
Yeah. You thought about killing the people in the other village next to us? Like, might help.
I don't know. Okay, quick one.
All right, hot take.
Give me your 2045 prediction.
Oh man, 2045. I think it's going to be further along those lines. I think that there is going to be an ongoing battle, a Cold War, an informational war, so to speak, around these technologies by kind of conservative groups, but then also by people. Like, I think that any technology that is truly going to elevate the human experience has to be a decentralized and truly democratic access. And I personally, unless like people in equatorial Africa have a chance at like accessing some of these technologies in like a healthy way, I'm going to be pretty skeptical over it, because I think that all we need is more ways to entrench elites, somatically, things like access to healthcare. Like, the human body is a mysterious thing, but it's also something that we've figured out a lot of shit about. And the fact that like people die from like bullshit diseases in other countries is still really hard for me, because it's so unnecessary. We have so many resources at our disposal, and we have so much to learn still about life that's in a truly egalitarian way. So I think there are going to be grim battles being fought over who has access to some of these advanced biometrics and biofeedback systems through these different kinds of augmentative processes. And I think that the whole-scale adoption of some of this stuff, it's not going to be wholesale for a long time. I think it eventually will, but there's going to be waves of, like how the Mennonites and the Amish and like the shit, what are they called? Hasidic Jew, ultra Orthodox Jewish folk rejected kind of industrial technology in like
Oh
a
yeah.
wide
Yeah.
scale kind of way, and that
Mhm.
like ultimately on the right, like that's just a watered down form of like the same kind of like fear of technology, fear of
Right.
progress
Right.
that has some like justifiable seeds of truth in it. I think it's going to be a weird, grim battle that goes on far past 2045 into subsequent centuries,
Okay.
and will ebb and flow.
Okay.
So it's hard to say. I think that fight it will just be in an immense gridlock with it. Total gridlock.
Total gridlock. All right. So
Yeah.
you wake up in the morning in 2045. I think humanity has undergone multiple collapse type situations. I think like at least 2 more deadly pandemics have ravaged humanity and killed millions, if not hundreds of millions. I think that we'll at least have seen one ecosystem fully collapse, and we'll understand what it means to witness the full collapse and failure of an ecosystem. I think that we will probably live in 2045 in a post-governmental society, because I think governments are going to become increasingly irrelevant. And I think we probably are heading towards some kind of weird neo like global tribalism where local structures are quite robust and regional and national structures are weaker and weaker by the day because they don't have a functional impact on people's lives. Like what do large scale infrastructures exist if not for the distribution of power and resources? Well, what happens when power and resources and the ability to extract those is democratized? What happens when you can harvest unlimited water from the air? What happens when you can print any consumable
3D
good?
doodad.
I think we live in a society where most people are hybrid technological vehicles. And I think we also live in a society where AI has begun to tap into the true potential of the human mind and the human mind as a supercomputer and as a quantum computer.
Quantum meat computer.
I think psychedelics have become a like whole new classes of psychedelics have been developed and are a widely accepted way of coming to terms with the burden of being a meat creature. I think most people have access to mental health resources in mass, and societies, even though the global ecological system continues to be a fight that all of humanity is entrenched in resolving. I think that the entire species is together in ways that we could have never predicted 100 years ago. Final thing, which I think this is probably a fantasy of mine, but I think in within the next 25 years we're contacted by a extraterrestrial organism, and it makes us realize that racial and socioeconomic boundaries are fucking meaningless,
really irrelevant
when we're being enslaved
by our alien overlords. Well, I think even closer to home, hot take, 2050, Yellowstone finally blows.
Dude, I was just thinking that. Absolutely, dude.
I mean, that's something that, like, we think this pandemic is crazy. Like, we have active volcanoes that could plunge the Earth into another ice age.
Now, I think, but by that time we've got technology that just scrubs that shit.
Hey, well, that's where the aliens come in.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. All right, man.
Hey, this was great.
That was really nice. It's good to talk to you, buddy. Hopefully
Always stay
everybody's,
modigliated as usual, per usual.
you know what I'm saying, hitting
And
that Modigliate flex.
dude, tap in and lab out with us next time, fans in cyberspace.
Tap in and lab out, son. Later, brother.
Bye.